As Vaisheshekar Prabhu just said, if you think you're done, then you're done. So it's a privilege even to have a question, and then to find it answered is very satisfying. Thank you for sharing. Who else?
I just feel very grateful and inspired to be with so many senior devotees. And often when we have senior devotees around, we feel there's a bit of a distance between them and us, but here I feel we're more personal and the gap is a little smaller, so I really appreciate it.
Nice. What was your name?
Janeshwari Devidasi.
Janeshwari. I was admiring that too. It's like a Sanga, isn't it? You know, it's a real connection that we're getting the opportunity to have with each other and with the senior devotees that are presenting, that there's a back and forth. It's not they're up here and we're down here. Thank you for bringing that out. Any other appreciation so far, ILS? I'm just going to ask while we're also just about to begin, if everybody can, if possible, shift forward a row or two. Some of the ladies have filled in the front, but it's nice to be cozy. Sorry to uproot you. You're already settled. My friend Ananda Murari Prabhu has a saying, a cozy kirtan is a powerful kirtan. So this is something to do also if you're a kirtan leader or you see in the temple you help to organize those programs. Sometimes the kirtan is not very effective just because everybody is in a spaced out position. Vastu is the Vedic art of arranging things in the place, the feng shui, so to speak, of putting things in their powerful place. So thank you all for shifting a little forward. It's going to make, hopefully, our time together more connected and impactful. Who else has something they'd like to appreciate?
Yeah, normally one would associate that when one comes for leadership Sangha, especially within ISKCON, it's only the spiritual aspects one gets to hear. But each time I attend Vaisheshekar Prabhu's sessions, the tips he gives are so useful even for your material life, secure life, as well as the current life. I just would like to relate to, I think you were also part of that session, where he said that anybody posing a difficult question to you, you just need to pose it back to them saying, how do you mean that? Or what exactly do you mean by that? So that gives you an opportunity to think over and also realize as to how much serious he is really thought about before asking us the questions. So very small, simple things, but it helps you in the long run. So all in all, it's a win-win situation. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that also about ILS, that it's a very wholesome look at the Krishna conscious experience. Not just japa or Bhagavatam class or when we're in the temple, but how as a community can we really improve our experience of Krishna consciousness day to day. And naturally by that circumstance, the whole world day to day will get more connected to Krishna consciousness as we recognize how to do that in our own lives. Thank you for bringing that out. What was your name, Prabhu? Vishveshwar Govinda Prabhu. Wonderful. My name is Deva Madhava, and I'm very humbled and happy to be here with you all today. I appreciate you taking the time out. There's many wonderful speakers who share here at ILS, and it's also day 4, so it's getting a little long in the process, and you've seen a lot of seminars, and there's more still to see, so I appreciate that you would take your time, which is valuable, especially here in the Dham, to come and hear something today, discuss the potential of youth in ISKCON, and I pray, please offer me your blessings and encouragement that our time here today will be fruitful. Hopefully I'm able to share a few things that you'll be able to appreciate and take back home with you to improve the culture of youth experience in ISKCON where you are locally. Before I get into my presentation in particular, because I don't know many of you, I'd appreciate the opportunity to understand a little bit better exactly why it is that you chose to come to this seminar of all the seminars that you could have come to at this time and throughout the ILS. So if you could just turn to your partner, the person next to you is your partner, by the way, at least for the next few minutes. Just turn to the person next to you and share with them what you hope to get out of the next 50 minutes or so together, out of the next hour. I do have until 6 o'clock, but I'm not going to take that liberty. Well, just turn to the person next to you, share what you hope to get out of the next hour or so together, and then I'm going to ask for some reflective listening. I'm going to ask that that person you shared with popcorn that back to me. So you'll have to tell me what your partner told you, and we'll just have a few people share that so I can get an idea of why you devotees have come here today. Go ahead. Switch it up if you haven't already. Just a sentence or two, what you're hoping to get out of spending time today in this seminar, the next generation or the last. Okay, let's bring it back in, and we'll hear now just popcorning around, just a sentence, maybe two sentences. Somebody share with me why their partner came to the seminar today, what they're hoping to get out of it. Yes? Okay. Okay.
Came to see something more because it's the future, it's really the future.
Got it. So you're already doing youth outreach.
We have the full form of voice.
Okay.
So we can understand the inner voice of the new generation.
You want to know the inner voice of the new generation? Yeah, right. Got it. So raise your hand if you work with youth in some capacity already in your service. Okay, quite a few of you. Yeah, that makes sense. Wonderful to have you here. Somebody else share what their partner wants to get out of our time together today. Please.
My partner is interested what about the next, that all the leaders, they are getting old.
So succession. What the leaders are getting old. Srila Prabhupada, I mean, it's a very dramatic but impactful display in the lobby there. Maybe some of you have seen the disciples of Srila Prabhupada who have departed already. Right? And it's very sobering for those of us that are going to be in positions of leadership ostensibly very soon by the force of time. One more person. Something their partner is hoping to get out of. Yes? Okay. How to work with youth in a way that they can relate to, essentially, and connect with, not just the top-down, dogmatic, got it. Okay, beautiful. Hopefully we'll touch on all these things through the course of the next 50 minutes together. I'll share a little bit about myself. My name's Deva Madhava. I met the devotees in Detroit, Michigan, at the temple that Ambarish Prabhu and Mother Lekha Shivanti purchased for Srila Prabhupada in 1975. And then in 2012, about a year and a half after I moved into the temple there in Detroit, the devotees there asked me to go to Ann Arbor and to start kind of a college preaching center there. And from Ann Arbor, we went over to Ypsilanti, which is a little town next door to Ann Arbor, and we purchased a place which we now call the Harmony Collective. So that's the name of our community. We have 2 buildings there in the city, called Ypsilanti, the city there. And then we have a farm a half hour south. We have 10 acres and 4 cows and a 4-bedroom house there. So 3 ashram spaces total. And that's over the course of about 6 years that we've developed that. And I started working with the youth of the mission, particularly when I say the youth, because that word itself, youth, is quite a vague term, isn't it? That's why I like to use next generation also, because sometimes maybe you've experienced it, especially in North America. You can say the word youth and it could be talking about a 40-year-old man. It's just referring to somebody who was born into the movement. And I began working with devotees that were born into the movement. Sometimes they're referred to as Gurukulis, or Kulis for short. They may not have gone to Gurukul, but still that's how they're referred to. So I began working with them here in Mayapur. I got to go to some of the sessions that they have every Friday. Now things have waned a little bit, but hopefully they'll swell again after the festival time. And I really got inspired there because I realized, oh my gosh, here's people, South Africa, Italy, South America, Latin America, North America, of course Mayapur in India, young people from all over the planet really excited to serve. Like genuinely, I could feel it from their heart. They want to do something for Prabhupada. And simultaneously, I felt very sad because I realized they didn't see how they could. They didn't recognize the opportunities that were there for them. And if I examine my own experience in North America, and I say this with sadness, not to puff myself up, the Harmony Collective, the community that we have there, it's the only project that's been started by a young person, somebody under the age of 40, in the last 30 years in North America. The country that gave us Indradyumna Maharaj, and Radhanath Maharaj, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Vishnujan Maharaj, and all the temples practically all over the planet. We could safely say probably at least 50% of the yatras, especially from Srila Prabhupada's time, were started by Americans. And that country hasn't had a center, a sustainable project started in probably 30 years, aside from our own, and now there's one there in New York City, although Ramroy Prabhu, the daily Harinam, that was really by his effort. A couple young people stepped up to help him. So, considering that, something's off. There's something that's not as it could be that is preventing the youth who are sincere and wanting to serve from being able to recognize what it is they can do. So we're going to discuss that today. Particularly, we're going to discuss three things. I'm really good at complaining. It's one of my specialties. So we're going to discuss the challenge first. I'm going to outline from my own experience, what is it that's causing this suffocation of the youth? What's preventing good, capable, faithful young people from stepping up and doing something for Srila Prabhupada? I'm going to outline that challenge from my own perspective, of course, as a young person coming up, having a lot of relationships with young people who sometimes in spite of the movement are still a part of the movement in a significant way. Then we're going to talk about the solution. What's something practical that you might be able to do back home to help the youth step into the possibility that Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement offers for them. And again, that's going to be from what I'm doing personally and what I'm sharing in other places where I go to work with youth. What's getting them inspired? What's getting them feeling like, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you for speaking to me in this way. I didn't realize that that was possible. I'm going to share those things. I'm also hoping by sharing those things, you start thinking about your own things. What will work in your place for your people? Because it is culturally different. If we're talking about youth in India, and we're talking about youth in Malaysia, and we're talking about youth in Africa, and we're talking about youth in North America, it's not going to work exactly the same in each place. There are, though, some fundamental possibilities that are there when we work with youth that I feel like we're missing out on as a movement. And so I will address those at the end also. And those, I think, no matter which yatra you are from particularly, you can appreciate that we're not quite tapping into yet. And if we do, we'll really see something special happen again. We'll see another flood of Krishna consciousness happening globally, as we did when Srila Prabhupada was here with us. What does ISKCON look like to a youth? Somebody brought that up already, right? What is the voice of a young person when they're thinking about ISKCON, when they're seeing what the lay of the land is? How does it look like for them? I'd like to offer that we look at the lens of the youth through the lens of Srila Prabhupada's wartime metaphor. Srila Prabhupada often used the war against Maya as a way to help us understand what is our mission as members of Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. So, when we think about what the youth see and feel in relationship to ISKCON, the most famous modern event in wartime history is a good way to look at what youth think and feel when they experience ISKCON today. And the most famous modern wartime event in history is D-Day. Raise your hand if you know what D-Day is, because I realize we're dealing with an international crowd, so sometimes... Okay, so quite a few people don't know D-Day. D-Day was the day that the Allied forces in World War II chose to make an advance on Germany-occupied Europe. Germany had occupied all the way up to the beaches of France. France is on the coast of Europe, the far west side of Europe. And so D-Day was the day that, led by American forces, but also British and other soldiers from other countries, stormed the beach at Normandy. Who's heard that term before? Storming the beach at Normandy. And that storming the beach at Normandy was done so that the Allies, the American troops and other countries, could gain some turf. They could gain some land so that they could fight the rest of the war and push Germany back out of the parts of Europe that they occupied. D-Day. We've all seen the movies. The early days of ISKCON, 1966 to the 80s, it was like D-Day. Srila Prabhupada describes that during that time, he employed battlefield commission. Battlefield commission, Srila Prabhupada says, every fifth man, he becomes a lieutenant. It doesn't mean that he's actually qualified to be a lieutenant. It means that when you're in a situation of severe wartime, and the enemy is breathing down your neck, somebody has to be in charge. Somebody's got to lead the charge. And so somebody's going to be made the leader, whether they should be, could be, or not. And so using battlefield commission, Prabhupada makes somebody the leader, and they lead the charge. But really, everybody in Srila Prabhupada's time was a foot soldier in Mahaprabhu's movement, weren't they? They were out there on the streets doing Harinam Sankirtan day in and day out. And if they weren't distributing the books, then they were driving the band back to the temple to pick up the prasadam and to pick up more books, to drive it to the devotees who were there on the streets, giving them more books, giving them the prasadam, and making that same run back again, sometimes 2-3 times in a day. And then, of course, the devotees at the temple who were cooking the prasad, and then the devotees at the temple who were taking care of the deities, so that in the morning the Sankirtan devotees could feel enlivened and go out and face a very formidable force that Maya was presenting, where seemingly we had no turf, we had no territory, we had no shelter, except this activity of Sankirtan, in a very direct way. And that sacrifice that Srila Prabhupada's disciples made at that time is a glorious one. And we look back on it with awe and reverence, as we should. And we revere that level of surrender that they demonstrated, literally giving their lives. In some cases, literally. And nearly completely figuratively. That they did nothing but eat, sleep, and drink Srila Prabhupada's desire to see his books distributed and to see temples, really, territorial manifestations of Mahaprabhu's movement around the planet. So how many temples were Srila Prabhupada's disciples able to acquire, temples or properties, during the time of his presence? 108, on the nose, right? There's a sweet Prabhupada memory where a devotee walks in, he's got a briefcase of cash from Sankirtan, and he puts it on Srila Prabhupada's desk. And Srila Prabhupada says, how much? And the devotee answers, anybody know? 108,000, Srila Prabhupada. What did Srila Prabhupada say back? 109 would have been better. But 108 temples, Hari Bol, okay? In just those 10 years or so, from the surrender of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, it was an incredible manifestation of Mahaprabhu's movement. And we gained that territory just in the way that the Allies gained territory in D-Day, that allowed them to strategically move ahead the rest of the efforts to take back Europe and the rest of the planet from Germany and their allied countries who were occupying the Axis, as they were called. So D-Day is remembered very fondly in the hearts of most of the modern world. Just a year ago, it was the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And there was an article that was written in a famous newspaper called The Beast. It's not really a newspaper because it's an online periodical, it's an online news source, but it's very popular with millennials. Anybody here read The Beast from time to time? No? They win all kinds of awards because they're brutally honest. They just give it, as Srila Prabhupada might say, as it is. And so, The Beast is really popular with millennials. Anybody know what a millennial is? Please raise your hand. Millennials are kind of like Hindus. Hindus don't know what a Hindu is, and millennial doesn't know what a millennial is. So raise your hand again, if you know what a millennial is. Okay, that's not many people. How about Gen Z? Anybody know what I mean by Gen Z? Okay, again, not so many people. So these are basically what we mean when we say youth, or the next generation. We're talking about people born from the 1981 to 1994, which characterizes millennials. I'm a millennial. I'm 32. And people who were born from 94 and to 2016, they're considered Gen Z. Gen Z, it's characterized, they learn to swipe before they learn to speak. This is the generation that was born with an iPhone in their mother's hand, and so while they're taking milk, they're also looking at Facebook.
It's called Generation X and Generation Y.
Generation X and Generation Y. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Nobody had shared that with me yet. So in India, Millennial is Generation X, and Gen Z is Generation Y. Interesting. It's like the metric system and then the... So, this newspaper, The Beast, is very popular with the millennials. And what The Beast decided to write about on D-Day was not how glorious the sacrifice was of those soldiers who risked their life so that we could gain some territory in the war against occupied Nazi Germany. They decided to write about something else. The Beast article is on the left. We think we know D-Day on its 75th anniversary, but remembering the forgotten civilian victims reminds us of the overlooked costs of war and offers lessons for today. Because when a youth hears about the D-Days of ISKCON and the great sacrifices that were made, it's true that wonderful things came of that. And many of them experienced quite directly also some not wonderful things that came from that. The headline, for those that can't read, that's from the Florida Times Union, a paper in North America. ISKCON sued for $400 million in sexual child abuse case. When you think about the old days of ISKCON, not only do they recognize the positive side, again, they were in many ways the direct recipients of the negative side. And they experienced the repercussions of the mistakes that were made because of hastiness, because of naivety, because of immaturity, and sometimes because of maliciousness, because of abuse of power. They experienced quite directly the pain of that. Just as there were many civilians who died on D-Day, not because they had signed up to be a part of a war, not because they were getting paid by somebody's military, but just because they were kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. They experienced a lot of difficulty. Thousands died. And so this millennial news organization, they ran an article about that on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Millennials and Gen Z, we're talking about youth, we're talking about the next generation. They value transparency and freedom of expression above all else. Are religious institutions noticed or famous for their ability to provide freedom of expression? No. Are they famous for their ability at offering transparency?
Not at all.
Not at all. Right? Quite the opposite. And this is one of the ironies of our present situation in ISKCON. And I will say, I will give a caveat, that I had a few youth who happened to be also part of the communication ministry in yesterday's course. And while they fully agreed with the point that I'm fleshing out for you devotees right now, they were in full support of the purport. They also added that compared to other religious institutions, which have also made the same mistakes ISKCON has made, right? Abuse of children, abuse of women, extortion of money, murders, etc., etc., etc. All those things have happened in all other religious organizations. It's not a surprise for a millennial or a Gen Z person to find out that those things have happened in a religion. What's surprising for them is when they find out, if they can see that that religion is willing to own up to those mistakes. And so, ISKCON, like most other religions, is not doing a great job of that. If you want to read right now about what happened in the early days, when it comes to the child abuse, for example, there are many websites online that you can go to. But are any of them official ISKCON websites that any of you have seen?
No.
No. Now, these devotees did mention to me, as I was sharing a caveat, that compared to other religious organizations, the government and other kind of watchdog organizations when it comes to religion do recognize that ISKCON is much more transparent, kind of a gold standard, but still not nearly enough for, I was going to make a joke, but I'll avoid. Still not nearly enough to attract and assuage the apprehension that millennials and Gen Z have around any organization or religious institution. The irony is that these problems, these missteps, are a great opportunity to help the next generation appreciate the incredible power of Krishna consciousness. We're not surprised either that we messed up, because we're conditioned souls, awkwardly groping in this material world for some sense of security. Once in a while we grab Guru and Krishna, and other times we grab Maya's sari and we pull it over us, and then we get in trouble. We're not surprised either, if we're honest with ourselves. It would actually be an incredible play of leverage to share these things in an open, honest way. Unfortunately, we're not yet. So if anyone that has worked with youth before knows you have to be able to have honest conversations around these situations. Child abuse, treatment of women, dealings with money. Why do you have big, gorgeous properties in India, but literally outside the gate you see people dying of starvation? These things, if you're not speaking to them in an open, honest, transparent way, you're going to lose youth before they ever even come in the door. One last critique, and then we'll start getting to the solutions. I told you I was really good at complaining. So one last critique. Freedom of expression. Put yourself, I won't put the youth on the spot. I'm not going to use names, never mind. There's cameras rolling. But hypothetically, there's a youth in an ISKCON temple somewhere in North America or Europe. And that youth wants to organize a kirtan. What does that youth have to do? Anywhere, yeah. That youth wants to have a kirtan in the temple for their friends and invite people. What does that youth have to do?
Speak to the temple president.
Harisham says, speak to the temple president.
Speak to the kirtan coordinator.
Speak to the kirtan coordinator.
Pray that we don't get in trouble.
Pray that you don't get in trouble, says one youth. Any other solutions or next steps for the person? Now, whose temple has a kirtan coordinator? The one person with that solution for the answer. You also do.
I mean, Mayapur has, I assume.
What's that?
In Mayapur.
Yeah, Mayapur.
You assume there's one. It sounds like a good thing to have. The point being, it's not clear, is it? How can a youth organize a kirtan at a temple? Not clear. The temple paradigm and the temple culture that we have in our communities right now, just put it out into your own experience. Have you ever been in a situation at your temple, in your community, where you've recognized a problem, or you know somebody else who's recognized a problem, and you have no idea who you should talk to about it? Have you ever had that experience? I see heads nodding, now I see hands raising. You don't know who you should talk to about it because you don't know that if you talk, you do know that if you talk to the wrong person at the wrong time, somebody might lose their service. Suddenly your name's not on the Raj Bhog list. Suddenly your child's not being invited to be a part of the drama, and you're not sure why, except that you said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time. That kind of confusion, that kind of leadership vacuum is no place that a youth wants to enter into. Because when you're in this volatile age, trying to figure yourself out, you don't want to be around a bunch of adults who don't know what they're doing. You don't want to enter into an environment that isn't clear and safe and certain. Because internally, there's already enough turmoil. You don't want to face a bunch of turmoil out here also. That's why if you ever see parents that have children that are running around giving problems, it's usually because the parent's uncertain of how to discipline the child. It's just that simple. The parent doesn't know what to do, so then the child doesn't know what to do. It's the same for our youth. So in our temples right now, because of the D-Day syndrome, because you can't go out and distribute books every day anymore, there's a lack of certainty about how to engage in Sankirtan in a wholesome, complete way, in a day-to-day way, in a way that engages me according to my nature, that's sustainable, long-term. If you want an example of this, if you want a pinpoint, Exhibit A, as to how this problem is affecting our entire community, and then just to be able to consider how it's affecting our youth, just think of our internet presence. How many devotees stood up today during the plenary when we talked about the need for ISKCON to have an improved internet presence?
Maybe 10.
Maybe 10. Would everybody in this room stand up if I asked, does ISKCON need a much better internet presence?
I would.
You would? Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to. Maybe we'll just for effect. Please stand up if you feel like ISKCON's internet presence is way below what Srila Prabhupada would like to see at this stage of the movement. Okay. Now sit down if your temple is a temple that has at least 10 IT or web development professionals as members of the serious congregation. Sit down if you have at least 10 members of your congregation who are serious IT or web development professionals. You don't know. Most of you just sat down. Okay, now everyone else can sit down. Speaking from my experience in North America, most of the temples are occupied by people that work in IT. We've got the guy building the website for Domino's to increase their profits 25% in 1 year. But the temple website still looks like it was made last century. By the way, it's 2020. There's a lack of vision for how to engage our devotees in practical ways, day to day. Why does the temple website have to look like that when there's IT professionals that take that as their spiritual home? Web developers that take that as their spiritual home. So when we consider that Srila Prabhupada said of the youth, of the college students he referred to, he said, let them do what they like and teach them how to do it for Krishna. That was Srila Prabhupada's strategy for the youth. When we consider that we're not even able to engage our initiated congregation in that kind of practical, down-to-earth way, that level of freedom and self-expression and devotional service doesn't look anywhere on the horizon for our youth. They don't see that possibility. But we still have a mandate, right? We still have to take over the world with Krishna consciousness. And there's a lot of challenges to that right now. I'm proposing through this seminar that focusing on the youth is the best strategy that we as a community can take. But our idea of what it means to focus on the youth will have to shift in order to do that. And I'm going to talk about what that shift needs to look like in a moment. But I'm just going to take a cue from the conquerors of India to help us understand the brilliance of focusing on the youth. Because, and I'll read this quote from Thomas Macaulay. Who knows Thomas Macaulay? Yeah. We must form a class, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. Thomas Macaulay was the guy that got Indians to feel bad about being Indian. The British occupied India. They came in with their guns just like they did all over the planet. As they used to say, the sun never sets on the British Empire because the British have occupied the whole planet. So they occupied India quite easily, frankly. But the Indians didn't care.
Yeah.
You guys have ever seen a cow standing in the middle of the street at noontime?
Yes.
Right? Motorcycles whizzing by, rickshaws, trucks, buses, and the cow is standing there. That was kind of like how the Indians were treating the British. The British were whizzing by with their imperialism and their colonialism, and the Indians were still chanting their japa, reading their Bhagavad Gita, sipping their tea, going to their temples, not minding so much that the British had come to conquer them. You know, detachment from the material energy, right? Some divya gyan is there. Macaulay wasn't satisfied. He wanted these people to feel and look subjugated. And so he developed this strategy to truly make India fall under the crown. And what did he do? He said, we're going to make their children resent, hate, despise their own culture. Because he recognized the Gurukul system, the Vedic system of education, created such a deep sense of faith and satisfaction in the people that it was impenetrable by the usual British approach of just coming in with guns and taking all the money. So he infiltrated the education system and made Indians not like being Indian. Our war against Maya is no longer a war of territory. From Prabhupada's 108 temples, we now have, just in India, I heard the staggering number, 250 temples just in India. Can we get a Hari Bol? Hari Bol! That's fantastic. And if those temples are simply cloisters for our congregation to come feel safe, and they're not the educational institutions that Srila Prabhupada imagined them to be in the war against Maya, then we won't see the effect of the planet becoming Krishna conscious, which was the desired result of the sacrifice of all the great eminent acharyas and the great devotees who gave their lives during the D-days of ISKCON. That was the purpose of that period of sacrifice, so that strategic implementations of the Sankirtan mission could happen later on, not so that we could all pretend that it's still D-Day and feel good about ourselves. So how to reinvigorate, how to bring the youth into this feeling? Who knows Zig Ziglar? A few people. He's just, look at him, he looks like sales personified, right? He's the Adi Guru, he's the founder Acharya of self-help, which started out as sales help. How to help salesmen. Why do you have to help salesmen? Because salesmen get told no all day long. Who's ever been out on book distribution in the streets? What's the hardest part about book distribution?
Rejection.
Rejection. Everyone's going to tell you no. And then you thought you were a great devotee, you thought you were very clever, and you had a beautiful smile, and your clothes looked good. And then you went and talked to this person, and they tore asunder that whole assumption with just a few words. No, thank you. Not interested. It crushes us. So Zig Ziglar came up with the original sales training, how to keep a sales force feeling vibrant, feeling excited, feeling powerful, so that they could go out and face rejection and push the product. And this is, without a doubt, one of his most famous quotes. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want. JFK, famous American president, his famous quote, everybody knows it, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You know who that messaging worked for? You know who JFK was speaking to? Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Same generation. He said that in the 1960s. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That was messaging. He's a politician, not Vyasadeva. He's giving messaging for a particular time, place, and circumstance to create a particular result. That messaging worked very well for the people of the 1960s and 70s. Srila Prabhupada said, ask not what ISKCON can do for you, ask what you can do for my ISKCON. And his disciples were very excited to show what they could do, to prove themselves within the organization. But today, 40 years removed from Srila Prabhupada's personal presence, after the many difficulties that the youth have faced over the years, the abuse, the apathy, the indifference, today this is the messaging. That if you will take on and really bring into your heart, you will see youth coming back to your yatras, to your communities, to your temples, asking not what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. Who's gone to Kalakanta Prabhu's presentation? I just saw it. Kalakanta Prabhu in Gainesville, Florida. Sorry, there's two Kalakanta Prabhus presenting. Kalakanta Prabhu in Gainesville, Florida. Who's visited his... Yeah. Overcoming obstacles to making Western devotees. I remember him giving a very similar seminar a few years ago. Anybody who doesn't know, Kalakanta Prabhu has 30 young people coming through every single year in North America, where in 97% of the other temples, you don't find a young person even in the ashram, not one. And he's got 30 coming through. He wants to get rid of them. Too many are coming. He can't keep them. They may want to stay, but he has to keep them moving because there's another 30 that want to be coming in. And I heard him say in a seminar a few years ago, when the culture at their Krishna house shifted from please Krishna, send us these people so that we can do these projects. Anybody familiar with that consciousness? You have a list of things you want to conquer for Mahaprabhu, and you have a list of soldiers that are needed. I need a sniper, and I need an assassin, and I need a spy, and I need an intelligence guy, and a radar guy, and a submarine guy, and a tank guy. You have your laundry list of people whose services you're going to plug them into. When he shifted from that consciousness, what can they do for us and to accomplish these projects? And he started saying, Krishna, if you send us devotees, we will take care of them. He started promising Krishna this. Gaurangi, when you were in Krishna house, did you feel cared for? Did you feel empowered? Did you feel inspired to spread Mahaprabhu's movement?
It was life-changing.
It was life-changing. Coming from somebody who's practically grown up in Mayapur and wrote a book, literally, as a 24-year-old, book this thick, gorgeous, about how to help young people come into Krishna consciousness. Yeah, let's give Gaurangi a hand. I'm preaching to the choir talking to Gaurangi. She's somebody who's very inspired as a young person to give back what she's received, and still that atmosphere that Kalakanta Prabhu created in Gainesville was life-changing. Ironically, Prabhupada, when he was in Gainesville in 1971, he said, in this small corner of the universe, so far away from Sridham Mayapur. Well, Gaurangi grew up in Sridham Mayapur, but it was Gainesville that she went and felt a life-changing impact because the devotee who's leading the yatra there recognizes a very simple truth which seems lost on many of the devotees in our community. It's not what they can do for you. It's what you can do for them. His Holiness Jayavantaka Maharaj put it this way, the entire self-help section of the bookstore, I heard him say this a few years ago in Atlanta, the entire self-help section of the bookstore can be summed up in half a line from Lord Chaitanya. Be ready to offer all respects to others and don't expect any in return. Half a line, right? Stop waiting for the youth to worship and start offering them appreciation, respect, opportunity. How are we doing so far?
Great.
What would you say the takeaway is so far? Just shout them out. A takeaway.
Give more, take less.
Give more, take less. Thank you.
Care.
Care. Whoa. Care. Wonderful. Any others?
Appreciate and empower the youth.
Appreciate and empower the youth. We're going to get into some solutions now, some practical things that are going on. I have developed these by being here in Mayapur with the youth and taking a kind of sample and survey of the many different ethnicities and international flavors of youth that we have here, all of whom basically are having the same experience because the internet, one good thing about it is that it's a unifying experience, right? All the youth are losing their nationalistic tendency more and more. They're all a part of, they're citizens of the internet now, right? They have the visa in their hand and they can access it wherever they want. So in many ways, the youth in India, and the youth in Malaysia, and the youth in Africa, and the youth in America are similar, much more so than they were 30, 40 years ago. The solutions that I'm going to share with you now are something that I've presented, developed, and to some degree implemented in Chicago, DC, Mayapur, and a few other places. But Chicago and DC are large temple communities and relatively, especially successful temple communities in North America, where they have a nice balance of young youth and youth that have been around a little while. And what we've shared with them are a few things. Youth opportunities. Now imagine, that's a spectrum, age 5 over here in the blue to 14, and then 14 to 30. I haven't done this yet, but we're getting there. I'm starting at the top, the 14 to 30-year-olds, because we want to try to save them. We don't want to lose them. The 5 to 14-year-olds, they're ostensibly stuck with us for a little while. Their parents still have guardianship. But imagine, we'll start with them, the 5 to 14-year-olds. Imagine the Hare Krishna version of the Boy Scouts. Now, they never claimed it, but the Boy Scouts was a Christian organization, and a wildly successful one. What did they do in the Boy Scouts? Did they put crucifixes around everybody's necks and give them a Bible? No. In the Boy Scouts, they gave young people experiential learning opportunities with their peers. Doing fun things, playing in the dirt, starting fire, making food over an open flame, being out in the woods, making their own clothes, cooking their own food, giving them experiential learning opportunities with their peers. Now 2020, Srila Prabhupada and his followers have done a lot of work to purify this planet. I was in London 2 weeks ago. There was a vegan restaurant here, and across the street is like a miracle. Another vegan restaurant. 2 vegan restaurants across the street from each other in London. Some of you may not understand that's a miracle. That's a different seminar. But the consciousness of people in general is changing. It's improving. There's a whole generation of moms who don't want to send their kids to the Boy Scouts, mostly because they don't want their kids to sit there and feel awkward having to hold vegan marshmallows on the end of their stick instead of hot dogs, like the other boys. There's a whole culture, they call them granola moms. There's a whole culture of parents that are looking to the culture of the East to raise their children, and particularly yoga. Almost 50% of Americans now have a favorable idea of yoga or meditation. 50%. Things that adults would like to do are things that they think their kids should do. They're adults and they're never going to get to it because they're too stuck in their ways. But they know that their children, if they learn to meditate from the tender age of 5, 6, 7, 8, if they establish the habits of being a vegan or a vegetarian from the tender age of 5, 6, 7, 8, then it would be easy and wonderful for them their whole life. Imagine an organization that offered that was coming from our community. Not as a funnel to make devotees, but to inculcate the principles of Krishna consciousness into mainstream culture. Knowing, unlike the Christians, who have to get you to say the oath of allegiance before they can feel good about the success of their preaching, unlike the Christians, having actual transcendental experiences, knowing when they say the holy name, when they take prasadam, when they discuss something from the Bhagavad Gita, that's enough. That's Krishna right there. No need to say the oath of allegiance. Simply give them the experience. Bhagavat tattva vijnana mukta sangasya jayate. By a scientific experience of Krishna consciousness, one becomes liberated. From the famous section Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada chose to incorporate into his marketing Bhagavad Dharma prayers. Bhagavat tattva vijnana mukta sangasya jayate. Why aren't we offering that to our children? To the children of the world. So now Next Generation Council, that's where we're actually doing something right now. That's what I've brought to other places. That's what I'm sharing with young people where I go. And the whole idea is professional and personal development. Why? Because that's what young people are interested in. They're not looking to join a religion. They're wondering, how am I going to pay for my lifestyle? What is my lifestyle? What do I like? What do I not like? What do I want to do? This is what they're wondering. And this is, if we give them opportunities to answer those questions, they'll come. They'll want to be a part. If we make them feel bad about having those questions, or if we say, you don't need to ask those questions, you need to accept the answer. Because I'm telling you. Because Prabhupada told me. Well, then they're going to start doing what they're doing right now, which is looking at you and saying, it doesn't seem like you're really following yourself. I don't see a happy experience in your life. I don't see you not holding your phone in one hand and the japa in the other. I don't see you hopping out of bed to go to Mangalarti. So why do you expect me to? Why should I believe that this chant and be happy situation is going to work for me if it doesn't really look like it's working for you? This is the mindset that's affecting the youth. The youth are smirking. I'm not going to have them raise their hands. But they're smirking at me because they know this is how it's experienced when you're a young person. Now again, that's a different seminar to help the whole ISKCON community come back to an honest place about our Sangha and what we're doing and where we're going. ISKCON Prabhu said in one of his discussions today, honesty brings happiness. Bhagavatam says, become a sadhava. Prabhupada says, thoroughly honest person. That's how he translates sadhava. Once you become a sadhava, you can be a real sadhaka. But if your sadhana is to look like you're happy, even though inside all other kinds of things are going on, it creates turmoil. The youth are experiencing that. That's okay. ISKCON's going to take a while to flesh that out. We're a teenager organization. The irony is that we're talking about helping the youth of our organization as a youth organization ourselves. Right? Teenagers helping teenagers doesn't always work. So, allowing our youth to be over here doing what they want to do while we figure ourselves out is something that the Next Generation Council would allow to do. Offering peer-based experiences and professional development. What do we mean by professional development? Practically in our community back in Ypsilanti, I'll just share one example. We have a young man, he's 20 years old. He didn't even bother to finish community college. Next year, he may be making 6 figures. He's not an entrepreneur. He's not doing a dance on the stock exchange. He simply started learning how to program computers in a business that a few devotees are in the office and got him a position. He learned how to start programming computers from the age of 17 because he's really into video games and he always buys the latest tech. And now at the age of 20, just turning 20, actually I'm sorry, he's 21, maybe he's going to turn 22 soon. He's almost making 6 figures. Please raise your hand if you know a young person who would like that kind of opportunity in your community. Raise them high. The cameras are on. You have those opportunities in your community. Internships, apprenticeships, experiential learning. If we create that for our young people, they'll appreciate it. That's what the Mormons do. That's what the Muslims do. That's what every other religious minority understands has to be done to sustain itself, is that you have to give people a lifestyle that they can connect to. Not just one event a week or a few hours in the morning, but a complete lifestyle that can sustain them. So the Next Generation Council allows young people to get a sense of who they are, what they want to do, and then gives them practical resources to connect to. Mentorship opportunities, personal and professional, internships, so that they see a track for themselves. If I stay with this community, there's a future. I'm not on my own. There's people looking out for my interest. Again, back to Zig Ziglar's quote. If you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. Is this clear so far? I'll open it up now for a few questions if anybody has any about this idea of the Next Generation Council and what we're trying to offer. It's either clear or uninspired. Yes?
The way you are telling the youths are perceiving things, the way...
Yeah, the way that we're talking about youth perceiving things.
So how long does this continue? From 14 age group, 14 to 20, 25, how?
Yeah, so maybe this is a question of who is a youth again. 14 to 30 is what we're saying because that's generally when people will have their life figured out by 30. One way or another. They'll have settled on things by then. If we are able to create a culture that allows them to feel safe in experimenting, safe in discovering who they are, alongside our community, through that very tumultuous time. 30 is the new 20, I promise you. Millennials have this word called adulting. You guys have heard of this concept of adulting? It's when somebody who ostensibly by age is an adult does something that an adult would do. Although that something is actually very uncomfortable then because the atmosphere, the social atmosphere of Kali Yuga is such that it's contaminated the sense of responsibility and integrity for everyone, including the young people. So to be 25 years old and pay your own cell phone bill is a big deal. It's called adulting. So we have to recognize that dynamic and give our youth some space. It's okay they're 26 and they don't know what they're doing with the rest of their life. You're 46 and you don't know what you're doing with the rest of your life. When you're comfortable with that, they'll be comfortable with that. Okay, so that, yes?
Can you explain a little bit more this idea of a next generation council? So in our local communities, do we have to get like professionals?
Okay, so next generation council.
Like internships, or are we offering mentoring? Like,
yes, great. So that question will just segue to the next slide. What are we offering? What are we offering with Next Generation Council practically? Young people need education, they need engagement, they need empowerment. What do we mean by education? Experiential and peer-driven, sensitive to an individual's nature and centered around life skills, universal values, and the power of a life lived in service to others. The Latin for educate means to educe. Educe means to bring out that which is already there. The education style that we're used to, that religions tend towards, and the Western world relies on, is one of induction. Telling you what to do, how to do, why to do, when to do, for their own motivated purpose. Faithful, though, to the Vedic principle is giving a person enough space, a safe space, to discover who am I, what can I offer to others, and how can I responsibly develop that. Anyone who's honest knows that takes time, that takes trial, that takes error, that takes pain, that takes sorrow. And all that has to be allowed for, accounted for, and appreciated by mature adults if we expect our youth to appreciate our community. So this is what we mean by education. And then engagement means opportunities to experience their own value and natural desire to contribute to a community. We have some engagements for people. Does anybody's temple need a videographer? Does anybody's temple need somebody to manage the social media accounts? Does anybody's temple need somebody who knows what to do with a yoga studio? These are things that a youth could figure out for you. You just tell them to go do it. Please get this done. And then let them do it in their way. Because it's their kshetra, it's their time. One principle that successful businesses who have navigated the shift into smartphone culture that now pervades the planet, some have died, some businesses that were thought to be as institutional as baseball in America have now died. Kodak film, for one. Who uses film anymore? You have all of your pictures in the palm of your hand, thousands, and the pictures of all your friends. You don't need film. The business who have survived that transition are the businesses who have learned how to connect to the values and ethics of the millennial and Gen Z generation, the upcoming generation, Gen Zs, the young 20-somethings now. And one thing they've understood is that millennials talk to millennials. Millennials consume 6 hours a day, on average, 6 hours a day of user-generated content. Who knows what user-generated content is? Yes. This is part of the problem. User-generated content means Facebook. I make a post, my friend sees it, they're consuming my content. User-generated content means the Elephant Journal, which is a new age magazine where people who meditate and people who cook vegan cupcakes and come up with different ways to tie their children's backpacks together using only sustainable cloth, post all of their stuff and tell people why they should follow them. Places like the Elephant Journal, places like Huffington Post, Facebook, Instagram, that's user-generated content. Millennials consume this on average 5 to 6 hours a day. To expect them to recognize and appreciate the value of our movement simply by holding a Bhagavad Gita in their hand is offensive. It's offensive to the situation and to Srila Prabhupada's instructions that we should consider time, place, and circumstance. It's laziness. It's lethargy. It's not faithful. It's not effective. It's not working. So recognizing engagement means letting the millennials, letting Gen Z figure out for themselves what they want to do and feeling like they're allowed to come to you and say, help me do it. I know what I want to do, now let me do it. And then the second tier is, here's some things we would like you to do, would you like to be able to do that? That's the second tier. But the first tier is this sense that they can do what they want to do and you're here to help them. And then that segues into empowerment, providing opportunities on a local, national, and international level to receive mentorship, professional networking, funds, and other resources. Again, going back to that person who wants to be a videographer. I just met a young man, he's taking wonderful shots. I looked at his camera, I said, how did you learn? YouTube. I paid for a couple YouTube courses. But a youth in your congregation might not be able to buy the camera. So what if your congregation had just a small pool of money, 10,000, 15,000? How much does an average Rath Yatra cost? 40,000, 50,000, 100,000. Imagine you had just $5,000 or $10,000 set aside for each of your youth every year to make grant applications. I want to start a little baking business. I want to start to learn to do photography and videography. I need a camera. I need some software. I need to buy some baking supplies. That sense of opportunity on a local level, and then again, on a national level, an international level, having that sense of opportunity and empowerment there for the devotees, there for the young people. We'll conclude with this idea that we don't know what we don't have when it comes to youth. Just 10 years ago in New York City, to buy a taxi cab license cost $1 million. To be able to drive a cab in New York City, to basically sit in traffic for the rest of your life, you had to pay $1 million. And then some young punk came along, never driven a taxi in his life, and he decided, you shouldn't have to pay money to drive a taxi. If you've got an empty seat in the car you're driving, you've already got a taxi. Uber and Lyft, overnight, upended the taxi cab industry across the planet. I may have taken 2 or 3 taxis in my life. I've taken dozens of Ubers. Because it's so natural. It's so easy. It's so a part of my generation's culture. You just Uber. How are you going to get there? What kind of question is that? Uber. Airbnb. How much does it cost to start a hotel?
Millions.
Millions. And the permitting, and then the architect, and then the feasibility study. Right? You might have a hotel after 7 years or so. In the developing world, right? You want to start a hotel, it might take 7 years. You have an empty room in your house. You have a hotel now. Airbnb, Uber, they're called disruptive industry elements. They've literally upended paradigms that existed for hundreds of years. Was Airbnb started by an executive of Hilton Corporation? Marriott? No, another young punk who'd never ran a hotel in his life, didn't have a degree in hospitality, but just thought, hey, I stay at my buddy's place anyway. What if my buddy could charge money for that? What if he could get a few dollars on the side, just keeping a clean bedroom in his house? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that make places on this planet open up in ways that they weren't before? Marriott's not going to build a hotel out in the middle of West Bengal, but now you can stay near Mayapur campus by going on Airbnb. There's no Marriott in Mayapur, but there are dozens of Airbnbs. We don't know what we don't have when it comes to youth. Because youth bring this element of spontaneity, of possibility, that literally just can't be considered by people who are invested in a certain situation, which all of us are. When I go to the university now, I realize I'm an old person. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's cool. And by admitting that, I'm excused from having to. I'm only 32. But technology has expedited the generation gap so much. It's ramped everything up, including the disparity between one age to the next. I'm 32 and I'm already feeling out of touch. I like Facebook. I don't like Instagram. And those who are on Instagram, they're going to be dinosaurs in 2 years because TikTok is taking over. Some of you don't even know what those words are. We don't know what we don't have when it comes to youth. And this is what's missing across the board in ISKCON. This is why in North America you haven't seen a temple come up from a young person in 30 plus years. Because we've stifled, we've suppressed, we've created this very institutional, boxed-in idea of what it means to be a devotee. And we've not allowed for that sense of possibility and opportunity to suffuse our community the way that it did when Srila Prabhupada was here, demanding it. You weren't his disciple if you weren't thinking like this. Why? Because this is how the Acharyas think. 120 years before Uber and Airbnb ever came on the map, there was a devotee by the name of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he created the Nam Hut, which said you don't need a temple, you don't need a brahmana, you don't need to be born into a certain family. You simply need the name, the Bhagavatam, and some devotee Sanga. Some other people who have faith in the name and the Bhagavatam. And when you eat, you take prasad. That's all you need to have a complete experience of Krishna consciousness. You don't need a hotel to have a vacation. You need Airbnb. You don't need a taxi to get from A to B. You need an Uber. You don't need a temple. You don't need an ISKCON to become Krishna conscious. You need Nam Hut, which is defined by the Bhagavatam, the holy name, Prasadam, and Sangha. That sense of opportunity for the Nam Hut, for the mission of Mahaprabhu, is not sensed, it's not felt by our youth right now. And I've outlined the issue that we're creating as older devotees in the movement quite extensively now. But it's also the youth's fault. My fiancée Vrindavani, she puts it like this. Many of the youth are waiting for someone to build a golden throne for them and a nice crown. And when that's done and somebody anoints them, then they will step into position. Then they will take on the service. So to those youth who feel that unhealthy sense of entitlement, please understand, just because nobody's asking you externally doesn't mean that Mahaprabhu, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Prabhupada aren't asking you, aren't expecting you to do something wonderful. It's time to step up. If it has to be in spite of your local leadership, so be it. But hopefully, I mean, there's many good-hearted devotees assembled here today who have come to this seminar, and we see many other youth discussions going on across this ILS. Many of the booths that are here, some of the other seminars are focused around helping our youth. Hopefully it doesn't have to be in spite of ISKCON that those youth step up and step into creating something wonderful, something unexpected, something truly spontaneous. But if it has to be, so be it. Don't wait. Eventually they'll appreciate it. Our effort there in Michigan is well appreciated, it's well liked, but it wasn't always the case. It wasn't given a lot of attention, it wasn't given a lot of resource. I had support from a few people who had me close, but other people who I kind of expected and kind of thought and reading in the books kind of assumed would be helping me were nowhere to be found. And that was okay, because Prabhupada is still there, Krishna is still there. The opportunity is still there. We'll close with Srila Prabhupada. I may inform you that all our children born of the Krishna conscious parents, they are welcome, and I want hundreds of children like that Because in future we expect to change the face of the whole world. Because child is the father of man. I'll read the last part again. Because child is the father of man. Famous pastime. Mahaprabhu asks Mukunda, who sings very sweetly, he says, Mukunda, I'm confused. Who is the son and who is the father? Is Raghunandan the son or is Raghunandan the father? Please, Mukunda, settle this confusion for me. And what does Mukunda answer? Raghunandan is the father. He is my father because he has taught me Krishna consciousness. Biologically, Mukunda is the father. However, Raghunandan is the father because he inspired Mukunda to consider a level of Krishna consciousness he hadn't before. If you don't know the pastime, please go to discover it tonight. You're in Sri Dham Mayapur. It's a wonderful one to read to help bake in what we discussed tonight. Why does Mukunda think that Raghunandan is the father? Why does Srila Prabhupada say, child is the father of man? Why did Macaulay understand it's the education system that will conquer India? Why as an ISKCON community don't we recognize the opportunity to support our youth? Srila Shukadev Goswami, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, the heart and soul of all the Vaishnavas. Mahaprabhu did two things, chanted and read Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by a 16-year-old who was naked, with dreadlocks, uninitiated. And he spoke it in front of his father, his father's guru, and so many other senior Vaishnavas. But a naked 16-year-old who was uninitiated, with dreadlocks, never attended another Srimad Bhagavatam class in his life, walked out of the woods and sat on the Vyasasana and delivered to us the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge that we each still relish today according to our realization. And Vaishnavas into the future ad infinitum will be able to connect to because of that offering from the heart of a youth. Krishna is 16 forever for a reason. Mahaprabhu didn't even bother to touch 50. Our culture is a youth culture. When we embrace that, overnight we will naturally become the coolest thing on the planet because we understand everything else. But because we don't understand this, it is a bitter and obvious irony that prevents the youth from accepting and appreciating everything else that the Krishna consciousness movement has to offer. I thank each of you from the bottom of my obstinate heart for sitting and sharing, and to whatever degree you were able to appreciate what we've shared today, and to whatever degree I've spoken offensively or inappropriately, please forgive me. Please don't let it affect your own desire to serve the youth. If anything, just take the impetus, take my request, that you go back and you try to do something wonderful for them. Because if you do, the reciprocation will be that they will do something wonderful for the movement. That's why Prabhupada did everything he did. That's why his disciples did everything they did, so that we could see that wonderfulness of the movement always manifest, not just in the D-days, but every day. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Yeah, Hare Prabhu.
Thank you first of all for lighting this fire. It's really exciting.
We didn't start the fire, as Billy Joel said.
We fanned it.
Okay, Hare Krishna, I'll accept that.
And very, very inspired. I think the question on my mind is for all of us in different parts of the world, and as we go back to our different communities, can you give us a few set of at least 3 small practical steps, and we can pick one.
3 practical things to do back home.
But and 3 might be even too much. Why not 1? Give us 3 options or 4 options.
Okay, sure. A few options of things to do back home.
Something immediately for the youth that we
somehow or other help the youth get together regularly. Manoram Prabhu, who is the youth minister who's sitting in on the last presentation, he's the miracle worker that has done the bus tour. which has single-handedly saved what we have of youth culture in ISKCON, despite him getting no money from the institution ever. He single-handedly organized bus tours, which are these 2-month experiences. He takes a bus and convinces young people to live out of it for 2 months with 50 other young people, and they drive up and down, and they go to the Rath Yatras, and they go to the Janmashtami festivals, and they do Harinam in the major cities all over Canada and North America, and they've gone to Mexico, and they do one in Europe. And these 1 week to 2 month experiences, depending on the context, these are the lifelines of the youth. My fiance, she says some youth live bus tour to bus tour. They just hold on by the thread of that taste. Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana, that taste. Param Dristva, the experience of being together and feeling excited about life in a Krishna conscious context. That's enough. So somehow or other, we have to stop that from being a 2-month phenomena, a 2-month miracle, aberration from the day to day. Why not week to week? Or at least month to month? The youth can get together. So what if they come to your house and watch a movie and that's it? Anyway, they're watching movies, right? At least they're going to get a little prashad, at least they're going to see some devotees, probably they're going to talk about the movie afterwards in a Krishna conscious way. Why not just do that much? Don't doubt that it's more than is going on right now. Don't fool yourself that it's bad that they'd be watching a movie. Oh, they should be doing kirtan. Oh, they should memorize Gita shlokas. Get out of here. Just somehow get them together. And then let that mature. Let them set the tone for how much Krishna consciousness they want within that experience. But just let them have it to begin with. Let them trust that they're going to see each other regularly. And see what happens as the Vaishnavas' hearts grow together. As we all know happens. Krishna Bhakti Janma Mule Hoy Sadhu Sanga. Krishna Prema Janma Teno Mukhya Anga. The seed of devotional service in the heart of the living entity is Sadhu Sanga. But once Prema has manifested fully, still Teno Mukhya Anga, the main experience of devotional service, is felt by associating with devotees still. Devotee association is not a means to an end, it is the end. It's the sadhana and the sadhya. Let them start experiencing that. Bring them together. That's my one take home. Figure out how you can help the youth get together. Not necessarily at the temple, not for kirtan or Bhagavad Gita class. Any reason that they can start coming together. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, I am really appreciating your approach. It is amazing and it is the need of the hour.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the
I
appreciation.
feel that this recording could be given to me, or if you can come to our place and do this presentation, because sorry to say that our leaders don't understand this.
Okay.
They don't understand this need that the youth has to be brought, and this is the way, because our approach so far was traditional, that even I tried with my own son.
Yes.
And he rejected.
Yes.
He said, I don't want to, he is not ready to.
The irony is, thank you, Prabhu. I'll take I appreciate your point very much. We're losing the faith of our congregation also as they give Krishna consciousness to their youth and their youth don't take it. It compromises the faith of the congregation also. It's pernicious. It's insidious, the effects of our treatment of the youth at present. So thank you for appreciating that recognition of the need of the hour, as you called it. This is being recorded, and it will be up on the ILS website, this particular presentation that you just heard. So you'll be able to share that with whomever you'd like, and I'll give my contact to anybody that would like to have it. You're welcome to contact me. We can stay in touch about what to do, how to do, what's going on, that you're doing well. I'm happy to stay in touch in that way. Here.
You were saying that you have set up something at Washington and Chicago.
In DC and Chicago, yeah.
What's that about?
So we've done preliminary sessions of the Next Generation Council. The idea of the Next Generation Council, in brief, is that you'd have some regular youth Sangha. If youths responsibly attend that Sangha, they gain access to the other resources. Mentorship, grants, etc. They don't have to be chanting rounds, etc., etc. Just show up at the youth things, be responsible when you're there, then you get access to the other goodies. Right?
This is for congregation kids as well as for the new kids.
As with anybody, right? Youth. Any new person coming, any person who's there that's responsibly connected, We've talked about making, when there's money involved, then maybe you make it like a 2-year kind of caveat. If you're a guy off the street like me, make sure he sticks around 2 years and he's not just after, a free camera or what have you. So those particulars will be worked out, but right now I'm just advocating the principle. It'll take some time to institute the fleshed out expression of it, but in these particular yatras, there's a more mature community, and so they're more ready to start applying these things. So this year when I go back to them, we'll start developing the mentorship networks, we'll start figuring out the opportunities in their local area for internships and those more like practical connections. Last time, the preliminary sessions are just letting the youth sit in a circle and complain about all the stuff we just talked about. Everything I just told you guys is what they tell each other when they're given the chance and they know there's no spies in the room. Then they let it out. So that you have to let that catharsis happen first and let them get over the fact that it seems like the leadership doesn't know what they know. And then from there you can start providing solutions. Yes?
I just want to give my personal experience.
Okay.
Because I have 5 children.
Okay.
And I have 10 grandchildren. And all these people live in the same place. They live on a farm in BC, Sharanagati.
Okay.
And they have all their houses, and they have all their positions. Like my son is the chairman of the board of Sharanagati. One of my daughters is in charge of the school. Another son-in-law with his wife has a Prashadam Reception program. So somehow that formula worked for them. They're all supporting each other. And in Sharanagati, there's youths, and they have, like you said, they have reading nights, just the youth.
Sure.
So I didn't do much to do that.
Let's give this devotee a hand. He's not going to take much credit, but we can do it.
The only thing I did, me and my wife, what we did is stay together and they chant Hare Krishna. And somehow other...
So Prabhu was mentioning, I'll take it from there. Prabhu was mentioning he lives in Sharanagati, which is a farm community, quite isolated, but kind of near Vancouver. And he's been able to see many of his children engaged wholesomely in that community, set up in leadership positions, doing very responsible service. So he says that he didn't do much. We might beg to differ. I'm sure there was some unique aspect to his approach, but also that's in a unique community. Many of us are not coming from Sharanagatis, where there's the need for interdependence. Konteya Prabhu gave a seminar on interdependence. It's cold in Sharanagati. There's not a Walmart 3 minutes down the road. You got to figure it out with the people that are there with you, and that's one of the beauties of our ashram, is it creates that interdependence and that need to trust each other. But if you're coming from a metropolitan situation, again, that's where most of us are these days, and that's one element of that experience that your children have that most youth aren't getting, is that need to connect. There's nobody else to connect to, which creates a sense of opportunity. Both, and from the management side too, we need people to do these things. We can't just farm it out, we can't pay a guy. We got to have our local people doing it. Yes?
I'd like to share this experience.
Anybody's, no loss. If you need to walk away or want to walk away, please do, but we'll just keep it rolling.
Thank you. This is Harisundar Das. We're from Pune basically. So we started detecting this problem quite like few years before, and then we started working on this direction, how to make our next generation leader of this society. So one effort we did last month was Balotsav, kind of. We engaged children from the age of 8 till 38, practically. Not children, but 38, okay. So they managed the whole Sunday, I won't say program, they managed temple, right from Mangalarti till the end. And they were filming the whole event, they were arranging the stalls, they were cooking, and they were giving explanations, they were taking tours of the temple. We have a 6-acre big project. And they were doing practically 100 times better than any resident person or a mature preacher could do. And they were so happy, so happy. So that's really amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we'll conclude there. Yeah, let's give a hand. Very well. Some vision there. Unsurprising, one of the model temples for any element that you might consider. I think a closing remark I'll share just from that. We just heard successful examples of connecting youth to the temple experience, which is wonderful and wanted. And at the same time, when we look at the house that the whole world can live in, right? As my Guru Maharaj said about the TOVP, it's already too small. It's already too small. Right? They're already having to hand out badges to celebrate its function. If we limit what it means to be a part of ISKCON, to be a part of the movement, to just the temple experience, the deity department, the distribution of books, if we limit Krishna consciousness to just those experiences, we severely truncate, we brutally cut off what's possible in this world for everyone, youth included, ourselves included, Krishna included. We really cut off what's possible. The temples are wonderful education centers, right? With like the military example, the base, but you don't want people to live on the base. You don't want everybody serving as a general or a lieutenant. They're there to protect, they're there to uphold, to maintain the safety and the standard. But you have that base so that the rest of society can be out there living their happy lives. And so when our understanding of Krishna consciousness escapes this temple paradigm and goes back to that Uber, that Airbnb, that Nam hut, decentralized idea, that's again where we'll see something powerful happening. Not to dismiss the efforts of temples. I started a center myself. They're essential. And at the same time, we have to liberate ourselves from that being the end-all be-all of the Krishna conscious experience. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. ILS Sanga 2020 ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Vamsha Kalpatrubhischa, Kripa Sindhubheva cha, Patitanam, Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.